Hey everybody, and welcome to another Into the Terminal. Today we're going to talk about pinning to a specific release. So Nate, what is release pinning?
Well, I mean, I guess we'll talk a little more about this in the deeper dive, but it's basically, I don't want the latest and greatest release for reasons, which again we'll go into later. And how do I stay on the release that I'm at, or the release that I'm required to stay at is probably more likely.
Great. Well, why don't we jump into the terminal and we'll show how to do that. All right, so we're looking at a Red Hat Enterprise Linux 9 machine. In fact, let's take a look at what it is. So this is a 9.0 machine. And
A little out of date.
yeah, well, we did it for a reason, right? So if I
Yep.
were to DNF update, there we go. We'll take a look at how many updates we would have to apply. And this would, if I answered yes to the question here, so we upgrade 436 packages plus install another 32. So let's call it 450 packages would be updated or installed roughly. But this would pull me up to the most current release of every package. So I'd essentially be taking this 9.0 machine and pulling it up to be a 9.5 machine. But what if I'm interested in staying at a specific minor release level? So let's say, let me answer no to this question here. And let's say I'm interested in seeing what releases I can pin myself to, right? Pinning is like sticking myself to a specific release. So if I do a subscription manager release -- list, these are all the releases that have been made for RHEL 9. And if I do a just release without -- list, this is what I'm currently set to, right? I have not made a decision. And so if you're not set to a specific release, you just, when you update, you get the latest versions of things. But maybe I'm interested in standardizing on 9.2, for example. So I could do a subscription manager release -set equals 9.2. Oops. All right, so now if I do the same DNF update, before it was about 450 packages that would be updated or installed, and I'm hoping to see less because we're not going all the way up to the most recent version of things. We're going to be going up to the 9.2 version of things, right? So less packages are installed or updated. But I'll be stuck at 9.2, and I won't go anywhere past 9.2.
Right.
Which means things like security updates that might have been published for 9.3 or 9.4 or 9.5. I'm not getting those either because this machine won't advance past 9.2. And that's really dangerous. And so with Red Hat Enterprise Linux Premium for x86 64 subscriptions, or it's an add-on that one can get called Extended Update Support, you can actually pin yourself to this release and still get critical and important security updates for this release for a period of time. So to do that, we pin ourselves to a specific release, and then we also have to swizzle our repository definitions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable the RHEL 9 default repos. All right, so I'm disabling the base OS and the AppStream repos. And if I do a subscription manager repos list, I'll see that I have a whole bunch, and a couple of them that will be in there have the actual term EUS in their name. EUS stands for Extended Update Support. So it goes for a specific update release of RHEL. And we'll talk after the transition about what releases are targeted and how long of a period you get and all that kind of stuff. But I've already looked them up, so I don't have to show you my giant list of available repos. Instead, we'll just whoops. Well, that's not going to work. Try that copy paste one more time.
Big long line of dashes isn't going to help you much.
Well, that's what happens when you are sloppy with your copy paste. All right. So notice that I'm doing an enable on the RHEL 9 BaseOS EUS repo and the RHEL 9 AppStream EUS repo. And so these EUS repos, in combination with that release setting that I applied earlier that stuck me at 9.2, those two things together mean that I'm going to have RHEL 9.2 software plus any critical or important security errata that have been released that affect the packages in 9.2. All right, so once my repos are done, now I can do a DNF update. And I'll be pulling myself up to 9.2 plus any security released RPMs for 9.2. And Nate, we'll have a demo a little bit later on like how this actually looks between the same version of RHEL, right?
Yeah.
When we transition. All right. We'll also talk after the break about how you could maintain your own repositories or some of the other techniques that you can use if you don't want to use extended update support or EUS. But I will caution you that anytime you want to build something yourself, you're doing the work, right? EUS is really easy because we do the work here at Red Hat for making those packages available and providing all the subscription manager tooling to make it turnkey, right? I just did a set, changed my repo IDs, and I'm done. Now I can just do DNF update and DNF install, and it's all good. When you want to maintain your own, you have to build and maintain your own. So it's a little bit more effort. Nate, any extra? Oh, actually, we'll do that after the break too. I'll also talk about moving from this release to a new release, right? So I'm currently updating this box to 9.2. Well, what happens when I run out of updates and I need to upgrade to something else, maybe like 9.4? What does that look like? So we'll do that after the transition too. Nate, what are you planning after the transition?
So I've got some examples of basically the pinning versus the pinning with EUS. We're also going to talk a little bit about enhanced EUS, which is another offering that's relatively recent. I think that's less than a year old at this point, which is just basically another scale, I guess, of EUS. We'll talk a little bit about ELS. What other demos do you have, Scott?
I think we're just moving to like from one release to another. We'll also talk some about the life cycle, which is going to be important if you are someone who selects or maintains software for RHEL, so that you know like what the plan is, so you can plan yourself accordingly, but also recommend for the people who use your software what they should do to help manage their machines. So stay with us, and we will get into more pinning yourself to a minor release of RHEL and making good choices.
Yeah, we'll be right back. Whoosh.
Whoosh. All right. So we're talking about minor releases of RHEL, and I have this graphic that I wanted to show Nate. That is, well, it was going to show. There we go.
There we go.
That is like the life cycle.
You caught me off guard, okay?
Yeah, I was actually going to do it myself, and then I couldn't find it for whatever reason because I'm terrible at producing. So what you'll notice about this graphic is that there's like small blue bars that stair step up, and then there's some longer light blue bars, and then some like really long green bars. So every 6 months, we release a new minor release of RHEL 9. And so when you're running your 9.2 at what I guess that was released in in the spring.
It says it here, doesn't it? Yeah, 2023 spring. It's right on your graph.
Yeah. Making me read. So it was released in the spring of 2023. 9.3. So when we released the 9.3 update, which happened in November of that year, all of a sudden we stopped maintaining 9.2, and everyone was expected to shift to 9.3, and that's how we were getting updates and publishing updates for RHEL. And then the following spring, in like May, we published 9.4. Then we stopped maintaining RHEL 9.3, and you had to move to 9.4. But for some folks, that frequent, every 6-month roughly cadence of migration is too fast. And then there are other people where maybe a vendor has said, my software is certified and we will support 9.2.
Right.
And so you can't move to 9.3 because if you do, then you're going to be out of compliance with your vendor's recommendation for the software that's running on top of it. And so that's the like kind of crux for release pinning, is either your organization just takes a long time to get things certified, tested, validated before you're allowed to move, or you may be running a piece of software that actually dictates the version of RHEL that has to be underneath of it. So every 6 months can be untenable if you're in those environments. So Red Hat started publishing, actually not started, like we've been doing it forever, this thing called extended update support. So the like slightly longer light blue line there, you'll notice is attached to every even numbered minor release. And so every even numbered minor release will continue to maintain critical and important security errata for this version for an additional 18 months after the next version comes out. So in 9.2, I was running it, and then in November of 2023, 9.3 came out. I could stay on 9.2 for an additional 18 months and still get all of my critical and important security errata if I did what I showed in the critical path, which is swizzle my repos to be the EUS repos. So Red Hat would publish all the critical and security errata compiled against all of the versions and stuff for 9.2 into those EUS repos. And then once that 18-month extension runs out, then I have to look at moving to another minor release. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second. The green line is an even longer maintenance period for critical and important security errata. I mentioned in the critical path that EUS, extended update support, comes with RHEL Premium x86 64 subscriptions. Enhanced extended update support, which is that green line, is a premium add-on for everything. So it's not included with anything. And you can buy either extended update support or enhanced extended update support for the machines that you want it on, a la carte. So if you want 3 machines that have this capability, you can buy 3 EUS add-ons or 3 enhanced EUS add-ons. And then you have it. The enhanced EUS add-on, instead of being 18 months of additional support, it is 3.5 years of additional critical and important security errata support for that minor release. So again, if you're not able to move off of it because a vendor has said you must be on this dot release, or you're not able to move off of it because things just live for a really long time in your organization, but you still want to get those critical and important security CVEs remediated, this is a great solution for that. And then once you fall off your EUS support, then you have to look at migrating to a newer version of RHEL in order to continue to get upgrades. If you stay pinned at 9.2 and your EUS support runs out, you stop getting all updates. And so all those new critical and important security vulnerabilities that are discovered and patched, you don't get, because you're no longer covered under that extended update support period. So if you're moving to this kind of stair step, stay on a minor release for longer, you need to be paying attention to how long you have and where your next step is.
Yeah, we actually, yes, obviously with RHEL 8, this isn't news anymore, but with RHEL 8, we moved to this 6-month release cycle. And we actually heard from customers that it's too fast. Right? So with RHEL 7, releases weren't quite as predictable. Now they're predictable, but 6 months is too quick. So EUS plus EEUS, or enhanced EUS, really helps for customers that can't move that quickly.
Yeah, so I'm just waiting on my my box to finish updating here. You can see it's almost done. Just running a couple of scriptlets for updating from 9.0 to 9.2. And then we'll walk through like how do you actually make that next stair step, right? Because you want to target another even numbered minor release. So if I was interested in this longer minor release planning, I don't want to go to 9.4. I'm sorry, I want to go to 9.3 or 9.5. I want to go to 9.4 or 9.6.
Right.
9.6 is not out yet, so that kind of limits my options there. So we're going to take this machine and we're going to move it to 9.4 after it's finished updating 9.2.
Almost
With
there.
security updates.
Just doing the scriptlets.
Yeah. So Nate, have you ever worked in an environment where this would have been useful, or you did use it?
I actually haven't. The places I worked in the industry, we didn't have regulatory compliance that made us stay at any specific releases. I think the closest we had some vendors that required it, but we didn't actually leverage EUS to get it done. I did, as a TAM, work with customers where this was very important to them, though.
Yeah, I get comments all the time from customers. It's like I'm running XYZ software. They say I have to be on this minor release, and that's why I'm important in maintaining the minor release. But what drives me up a wall is the number of times that a vendor has done that, but they choose an odd numbered minor, which we
Yeah,
know is 6 month lived lifespan.
right.
If you are working for a software company and you are making software for RHEL, choose the even numbered miners to centralize on, because then somebody has a chance on actually getting some additional update support from Red Hat if that's interesting to them, which it should be. All right, so that box had been updated to 9.2. And by changing the release set to 9.4, now I can do a DNF update. And this set of updates that it's calculating will take me from 9.2 to 9.4. And because I've already swizzled my base repositories to be the EUS ones, I'll be on 9.4 and only getting critical and important security errata for 9.4 for the next however many months until extended update support runs out, which I can refer back to my graphic to figure out when that is. But so that's what's happening here. And that's how you kind of stair step on those longer versions, right? So now you can choose to upgrade every year or every 2 years, depending on your requirements. But you'll have to take a big step to move to 9.2 to 9.4, right? Because there's a lot of packages and stuff that happen during that period. So we'll see just how many in just a few seconds.
Shantanu has a very tongue-in-cheek question for us about why or how odd numbers have wronged us that we've decided to only focus on even numbers.
Uh,
I'm sure that's
so
an engineering thing, right? That's a maintaining all of them for this long is just a lot of work.
yes, and when we went to the faster release cadence, that was like untenable for engineering to maintain an EUS
Yeah,
stream for every release.
right.
But the other reason that we went from or follow the even numbereds is the very last release of RHEL for a specific major release is .10.
Hmm.
And that .10, notice there were no like EUS and enhanced EUS add-ons for it, because that's when RHEL moves from full support, where we're making changes to the versions of things, we're giving you bug fixes and new updates, new like software. Once you hit the 5-year mark in RHEL, you transition to maintenance support. And so in 9.10, which will come out in a few years, um, 9 will get only critical and important security errata for the duration of the 9.10 lifecycle. So there won't be a enhanced update support, because at that point, like only critical and important security errata are what's being put into that stream. And that's an even number. And so If we did odd numbers, then we'd have this weird mismatch of like 9.10 has a really long life cycle, but so does 9.9. That's kind of crazy. So we ended up with just even numbers are the ones that we go for enhanced updates for. All right. So if I say yes to this question, my box will be updated to 9.4 and all of the software that comes with 9.4, including all of the critical and important security errata that have been released since the release of 9.5, which happened in November. So I still get those critical and important security errata being published in the EUS channels for 9.4, even though the main Red Hat Enterprise Linux 9 releases moved on to 9.5. All right, Nate, what did you want to show?
So I had a bit of a demo here. So you could argue, right, that, and you kind of showed this in the critical path. So I don't want to delve too deeply on it, but if you pin to a specific version, because of requirements, like say you have a software vendor that says you must be on 9.2, you could just pin it and be done. But I wanted to delve a little bit into why that's not a great idea, right? So let me just bring up my own terminal here. All right, so we've got also a RHEL 9.0 system here. Almost like you and I spun up the same lab environment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin it to 9.2, right? And again, this was kind of what you did in the critical path. So I'm not going to go too deeply on what that command's doing because you already covered it. And then we're just going to do that same DNF update that you did earlier to kind of refresh everybody's memory how many packages it said it was going to grab. Now, what it's doing here is it's basically saying 9.2. Now, when we move on from 9.2 to 9.3, 9.2, there's no more updates going into that repository, right? So that channel, that repository, that version, it just doesn't get updates anymore, period. So you can see here, it's gonna upgrade. Let's see, what's the total here? 357 plus 19 packages. It's gonna install 19 and upgrade 357 of them. We're gonna tell that no. And then what I'm going to do, so what that's getting is the state of 9.2 after 9.3 was released, right? There shouldn't be anything past that date in that package set. So if we now go in and use the subscription manager commands that you showed earlier to disable the core repositories, right? So here I'm just disabling the RHEL 9 AppStream and RHEL 9 base OS sort of mainline channels. And then we're going to also enable those EUS channels. Now, notice there's not different EUS channels for each release, right? Just like there's not different channels for each point release. That's all metadata that's exchanged based on that release version that you set. Okay, oh, there's the S got dropped off here. Let me add the S. It's not an subscription manager. It's a subscription manager. I don't know what an subscription would be. People can think about that if they want. So once this is enabled, we're going to do that same DNF update again. And then we're going to see there should be a different number of packages available. So like I said, the other one said, what's that come out to? 360, 70, 82. Is my on the point math here doing the right thing? No, that is wrong. Let's see. It'd be 367 minus 1. 377 minus 1. So 375. 376. Math.
376.
Math is hard. Okay. So we're going to do the same checkout, or we're going to do the same DNF update again. And you can see there, the numbers are different.
Yeah, and so this is the inclusion of those critical and important security updates that have been included in the EUS channel.
Yeah, so what, roughly, I don't know, we'll call it 20-ish, maybe a little more than that, packages that were updated, because we went from 376, I said the number was, right, to like 390, 391. Yeah. So you can see that in 9.2 specifically, those things have been fixed and updated, right? So if you were to just stop at 9.2, or if you were to snapshot 9.2 on the day that we moved to 9.3 and use that as a custom repository locally, you're not getting these additional updates. Now, those are critical and important updates, right? These aren't just like simple little low-hanging fruit vulnerabilities. These are things that were considered important enough to be fixed in the EUS stream, right? So those are things you don't want to live without.
Right. And a lot of times, like, for example, shell shock, log4j, trying to think of a couple others, heartbleed, those were all
Right,
critical, right?
right,
And if you stuck yourself at 9.2, any of those things that happen, you're not getting remediations for. So I think the other question is, all right, great, you guys showed me the Red Hat way of doing this, but I'm using some derivative of enterprise Linux or some other enterprise Linux. What do I do? So things get a little bit harder when
yeah,
you're using another enterprise Linux. So you can do stuff like copy the repos for that minor release and subscribe your system to it. So you basically like fork all of the content over to a different directory on your web server, you use create repo on it, and then you point your systems at this alternate repository that you've created. And then anything that comes into the newly updated version of your enterprise Linux, you have to look at and hand carry over to your secondary repository for your pin systems, and then do a create repo so it updates the metadata for those systems. And then you'll learn real fast that usually it's not just a package. A lot of times it's a package and some dependencies. So you'll carry that one over that was referenced in a Red Hat security vulnerability bulletin, and then you'll do a DNF update, and it'll error about missing dependencies. Then you have to go and find those dependencies in the newer version of the
right,
repos and put those in your repo, and then do the same thing again. And eventually, after a few iterations of that, you'll have all the dependencies satisfied, and then you can happily use your critical and important security updates that way. That said, you're running on the newer version of that library or application. So it's not really a true backport for the version that you're running that you pinned yourself to. It's the version you pinned yourself to plus select updates to something newer. So
right,
it's close, but not quite the same. Probably good enough for most applications. But
right,
it's a lot more work on your part because you got to like fork that repository, and then you have to move packages from the active repository for that Linux to your forked repository, and also be sure to get all of the update dependencies and stuff too.
right. All right. So the other thing I was going to do was just do the same example here. If we moved it to 9.4 and then, of course, did an update, you should see a whole bunch more packages. But the next thing I wanted to show you was the difference between EUS and E4S, as we colloquially call it. But that's the enhanced extended update support, right? So give me just a second here. Let's see how many updates we get here with this one. Now, you might remember from Scott's graph earlier that 9.2, 9.4, and newer are not included in EEUS yet because they are not old enough yet, right? But 9.0 is. So there you can see there's a whole bunch more packages if we were to move to 9.4. Let me clear the screen here. And then what we're going to do is switch our release version back to 9.0, right? And my machine kind of hung when I did this a minute ago, so I hope it doesn't happen again. That's why I had to turn off my feed there. Set it back to 9.0. All right, so now we're set to 9.0. If we do a check update now, I'm not going to waste the time. You saw that if we pin it to a version and do not change the EUS, or actually no, we are in EUS, so let's go ahead and do this. Oh, wow. F check update doesn't give me totals, does it? that was like muscle memory there. Let's see. I think it doesn't. But anyway, you'll see that we're pinned at 9.0, and it is going to try to get us updates, right? Let me redo that. Let me do DNF update again, so it gives us the totals. And what you're going to see is that even in the EUS channel, we do get updates. And this is probably a different number than if we were going to do it without the EUS channel. But if we turn on the E4S channels, and that's what they're called, right? So let me just copy paste here, and I'll show you what they look like in a second. So you've seen this subscription manager command a bunch of times at this point. What I'm doing here is I'm going to disable the EUS repositories for both base OS and AppStream. And I'm going to turn on E4S repositories for base OS and AppStream. Right? I'm going to do it in one command here to save us a little bit of time. What's doing is turning off those, the EUS, turning on the E4S. And since 9.0 is eligible for E4S or for enhanced EUS, what it should do is give us a different set of packages for that update. So you see above, it was 127 packages and 127 updates and 13 installs. So let's let this finish, and then we're going to do that same update again in a second.
And Nate, the reason that we're using E4S with 9.0 is because the 2-year EUS has already elapsed, has already expired
Yes.
for 9.0.
Yeah, that's the point here. So the 9.0 is the the only release of 9 that is currently in the state where we can show a difference between EUS and E4S. That's why I switched back to 9.0. I don't think most vendors would ask you to use 9.0, but it's just the only one that's available to us at the moment with 9.0. So once this is available for like 9.2, for example, you'll be able to do the same thing with 9.2. I don't know what it is with my lab environment today, but it is hung again. Last time I just had to refresh it and it worked. Let's hope. There we go. Let's do a quick DNF repo list and make sure that we have the right repositories enabled and the command completed. Yep. You notice it says SAP solutions on it. That's because there was another offering called SAP solutions, which effectively did the same thing. So let's do a DNF update again. And what this should do is give us a different package set. It should give us more packages because now it's the E4S repo instead of the EUS repo, right? So I forget what it was before. 127, I think, was the upgrade, and I think 13 installs. And here you can see that we get more because now it's on that 4 or 3.5 year extension instead of the 1.5 or 2 years that you were getting with EUS. All right, and that is basically the difference between EUS and enhanced EUS. So, are there any questions about those while I see you've been focusing on chat. Maybe you're getting everything.
Yeah, questions about like what comes with what. But
Yeah.
E4 is always an add-on. So it doesn't come with any RHEL subscriptions of any type. If you want 4 years of EUS, that's the add-on that you have to pay for that gives you access to those subscription repos. And EUS only comes with premium x86 64 subscriptions. So if you're with different architectures, that's probably an add-on you have to buy. If you're doing something like standard subscriptions, it would be an add-on that you have to buy.
Right.
And neither one of them is eligible for self-support subscriptions, if I remember correctly. So yeah. So check, you'll be able to check if you do a subscription manager repo list. If you have subscriptions for them, they will show up in your repo list as available repositories.
Right.
But again, you can buy a subset of your population for those. So if you have 1,000 boxes, but you only want 3 to have EUS, you can buy 3 EUS add-ons. And then
But
EUS on those 3 boxes that you have the subscriptions applied to.
But they'll show up. They'll effectively show up across your fleet, though. So you'll have to be careful where you turn them on. Keep track of that. If you've got 1,000 machines and only 3 EUSs, then you don't want to turn on 5 of them.
Right.
That's what I'm getting
and
at.
Our subscription tooling, either through satellite, that'll provide you an accounting of how your subscription is being used, or if you're registered well, not even registered. If you registered with Subscription Manager through the Red Hat normal CDN, you'll be able to go to the subscriptions application, and it'll also provide you a full accounting of like where you've got those things enabled on your machines.
Right. All right. So the only other thing I wanted to touch on was, I guess the first thing was there's also an offering called ELS, which we have not touched on at all. Well, you've kind of touched on it when you were talking about when you get to the .10 release, right? I guess you didn't. So at the last release of a given major release of RHEL, you'll continue to get updates throughout the maintenance phases of that release. But then there comes a day when that release is no longer getting updates, right? Then that's generally 10 years after the release. However, we realize that some people just can't still, even after 10 years, they can't move major versions. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Similar reasons to why you might pin at an EUS subversion. And for that, we offer a thing called ELS, which is extended lifecycle support, which means you're at the end of the entire lifecycle for that release of RHEL. And we're going to give you a similar service to what you're getting with EUS, except at the .10 level, right? So you'll continue to get those critical updates, or critical and important security updates on that last release of RHEL, right? So I don't have a demo for that because whatever.
But that's only when the last release of RHEL is expired, right? So during that whole 5 years of maintenance support,
yes,
we're giving you critical and important security errata on those boxes. It's when it reaches the end of its 10-year life cycle that if you want to continue running, RHEL 7 is actually in this point right now. Yeah. RHEL 7, we're not doing any more updates for its normal maintenance. So if you want to continue to run RHEL 7 and get critical and important security errata, you need to have the extended lifecycle support add-on, or ELS. But I didn't really talk about it because it was a little bit different than what we were talking about today, which is like pinning to minor releases, because that one is more about like supporting your major releases for longer.
A lot of conversations, when you start talking about EUS, people start getting confused with the term ELS and EUS. That's the only reason I wanted to touch on it today, so that people understand the difference between the two topics, which is why I didn't prepare a demo for it.
Right. And that's also like when you're purchasing it, make sure you're purchasing the right one.
Right.
LS, extended life cycle support, are for major releases outside of their maintenance. So RHEL 7 is currently the only one in there. There is only ever one in there. So when RHEL 8 falls into it, then RHEL 7 will fall out of it. And then EUS, or enhanced EUS, that's for minor release updates. So there's dot releases, and for being able to run those dot releases for extended periods of time.
Cool. So I did have one last thing I wanted to show before my lab self-destructs here. And that is, Scott, what if I all of a sudden do not want to, I don't want to be pinned to a release anymore, right? And for that, if we do a subscription manager release -- unset, what that'll do is it'll say the setting that I made for the release that I want to be at, just delete it, get rid of it, put me back on mainline. And then, of course, we'd have to go through and say, turn off the ELS or E4S repositories that we put in place.
Actually, you don't need to.
You don't need to? Oh, I guess you would. You just get the latest anyway, right? So now you can see that my release is not set. Let's test your theory here. I guess you're right, though. Makes sense. So if I do a DNF update now, it should get.
Because the Dorito told me.
Oh, okay. Uh-oh, I've broken something. I think you're wrong. Doesn't work with E4S. Can't download repo data for. Oh. Scott was wrong on the air. I'll have to write this down.
All the software is in there. We put it in both regular and EUS repos when we publish it.
See if I can.
Is still required. I did want to also clarify, Nate. We talked about using that setting, and I remember seeing a blog a while ago where somebody was like, "Oh, if you want to pin yourself to the minor release, you just subscription manager release set 9.2 done." Not done.
Yeah, not done.
When
I
you're
have 1
pinning
minute left to try to finish this demo before it explodes. By the way, you can see the timer at the top.
when you are pinning yourself to a minor release, you want to both set your minor release and also swizzle yourself to the EUS releases. If you just set the minor release with subscription manager, you won't get any more software. And even if you do, you're subscribed to the Red Hat CDN, it's not going to know to pull back those specific ones that have been released later. You'll just cease getting software when the next release of RHEL gets published. So you don't want to just set yourself on a minor release. You want to set yourself on a minor release and change your repositories to an effective EUS stream for that minor release.
Come on. I don't think we're going to get to the example here because I've got 30 seconds left and it's hung.
Uh-oh. Somebody toggled on the allow it to extend. Yeah, you're definitely not getting all the metadata for, but notice it's not pulling from the EUS repos anymore, so that's good.
Yeah, I just switched it, so that was good, but I didn't take the time to double check that. Yeah, I have 8 seconds left. But anyway, you'll just have to trust us. What it's going to do is it's going to get all the latest 9.5 release data. There we go. There you go. You can see all the packages just in time for it to die. So yeah, next time we cover this, we'll have to make a new lab that has a longer timer on it.
Yeah. So I think that runs us off our prepared comments today for pinning yourself.
I think so.
And Shantanu and I were having a conversation on like how one would do this for send to a stream. So there you're doing the similar process to what I described for other enterprise Linuxes, which is making a duplicate repository for whatever thing you're trying to pin yourself to, and then hand carrying over and adding to that repository any additional packages that you need to apply for updates. So a more time-intensive method of doing it, but it is the free way of doing it. So if your time is less, there you go.
There's always a free way.
Yeah. So Nate, I don't think we have a plan for next week, but we will be back next week.
Sure we do. We're going to be talking about Linux.
Oh, well, there you go.
That's our plan.
So we will see you next week for another Into the Terminal. Thanks for watching, everybody. Enjoy.
Yeah, everybody, have a great one. See you next week.